The door closed behind them with a sound like the end of the world, and Ryla Jorvath stood in the middle of the orchardist's bedroom with her hands shaking so hard she could not untie her own belt. "Here," Jonah Garrett said, and his voice was gentle, nothing like the formal vowels he had used during the ceremony. "Sit down first." She sat on the edge of the bed because her knees were about to give out anyway. 19 summers old, and she had agreed to this, signed the compact papers with her own hand, stood in front of both clans and spoken the words. Her father had asked her 3 times if she was certain. She had said yes every time because the clan needed the water agreement, and the Garretts needed someone who understood the High Meadow Springs, and a marriage was the only seal that would hold for a generation. But now the door was closed and this human man was her husband, and she could not make her fingers work. Jonah knelt in front of her. He was 22, tall and lean from orchard work, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and hands that were calloused from pruning shears. "Let me get your shoes," he said, and before she could answer he had unlaced the ceremonial boots that pinched her toes and set them aside. His own shoes followed. Then he stood, pulled the quilt off the bed and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Come on, up you get." "What?" "We are going to sit against the headboard like 2 people who have known each other for exactly 4 meetings and 3 written letters, and we are going to talk until you stop shaking, or until we fall asleep, whichever comes first." He settled himself on one side of the bed, his back against the carved headboard, and held out a hand. Ryla climbed up beside him, the quilt still around her, and he pulled a second blanket over both of them. Then he put an arm around her shoulders, and she went stiff. "We have time," Jonah said quietly. "The compact is for 20 years. We don't have to do everything tonight." Her throat unlocked. "Your family, my family, is asleep in their own houses, and my sister made me promise on our mother's grave that I would not be an idiot about this." He said it lightly, but his arm around her was steady. "You agreed to live here and help manage the water rights. I agreed to teach you the orchard and not be an ass. Everything else we can figure out as we go." Ryla found she could breathe again. She let herself lean just a little, and his shoulder was solid under her cheek. He smelled like apple wood and the lavender soap they had both been given to wash with before the ceremony. I know what you thought. Everyone knows what wedding nights are supposed to be about." He shifted, getting more comfortable. "But I have been working this orchard since I was 8 years old, and the one thing I know is that you cannot force good growth. You can only give it the right conditions and wait. That is a terrible metaphor for marriage." He laughed, and the sound rumbled through his chest. "It is, isn't it? My sister said the same thing when I tried it out on her, but the point stands. We have time, Ryla. I am not in a hurry." She closed her eyes. The shaking had not stopped, but it was smaller now, something she could almost ignore. "You are a strange man, Jonah Garrett, so I have been told. Usually right before someone asks me to do something inadvisable with a ladder." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Do you want to know what I am actually worried about?" "What?" "Whether you can teach me the high meadow irrigation before the dry season hits. My father tried for 3 years to get the spring-fed channels working right and never managed it. If we don't solve that, we lose 1/3 of the young trees." It was such a practical concern, such an orchard concern, that Ryla felt something in her chest ease. "The gradient is wrong in the lower channels. You need to recut them at a slant, and you need check dams every 30 feet. Check dams, like for erosion control, like for water control. You slow the flow so it soaks in instead of running off. My brother and I built 20 of them last summer." Jonah pulled back enough to look at her, and his eyes were bright with interest. "Can you sketch it?" "I have paper in the desk. Now." Well, no, I suppose it is the middle of the night and we just got married and there are probably more traditional things to do. He grinned, and she saw that he had a chipped tooth on the left side, something she had not noticed before. But tomorrow. Tomorrow, Ryla agreed. The shaking had almost stopped. She let herself settle against him, the quilt warm around her shoulders, and Jonah pulled the blanket up higher. "Tell me about your family," he said. "I met your father and your brother during the negotiations, but I don't know much else." So she told him. About her mother, who managed the clan's textile trade and could weave patterns that looked like flowing water. About her younger sister, who was training as a healer and had a mordant sense of humor. About her brother, who was betrothed to a girl from the Northern Ridge clan and spent half his time carving elaborate gifts he was too shy to give her. Jonah listened, asked questions, and told her about his own family in return. His sister, widowed 2 years ago, who managed the press house and had a 6-year-old son. His brother-in-law, married to his older half-sister, who kept the accounts and had opinions about everything. The 3 cousins who worked the harvest and spent the off-season fighting about crop rotation. "It sounds chaotic," Ryla said. "It is, but it works." He yawned, and she felt the movement. "Most of the time. You can sleep if you want, so can you?" His voice was already drowsy. "The bed is big enough." Ryla closed her eyes. The room was dim, just the coals glowing in the small fireplace, and outside she could hear the wind moving through the orchard trees. Jonah's breathing slowed, deepened, and his arm stayed warm around her shoulders. She thought she would lie awake all night, too keyed up to rest, but at some point the darkness took her under. She woke to daylight and the smell of bread baking. Jonah was gone, but there was a note on the pillow, written in a clear hand, "Gone to check the irrigation. There is breakfast downstairs. Take your time." Ryla dressed in the work clothes she had packed, grateful to be out of the ceremonial tunic, and went downstairs. The house was small, just 4 rooms, but it was well built and the windows faced east to catch the morning light. The kitchen was warm and Jonah's sister was pulling a loaf from the oven. "You must be Ryla," the woman said. She was older than Jonah, maybe 30, with the same dark hair and a face that had smile lines at the corners of her eyes. "I am Eliza Garrett." "Well, Eliza Moss, but everyone still calls me Garrett, and this is my son Pip." A small boy looked up from the table where he was eating porridge. He had jam on his face. "Are you really an orc, Pip?" Eliza said, but Ryla just nodded. "I really am." "Do you have tusks?" Ryla smiled, showing the small tusks that curved up from her lower jaw. They were not large as orcish tusks went, but they were visible. Pip's eyes went wide. "That is amazing," he breathed. "Can you fight with them?" "Not really. They are mostly just for looks." She sat down at the table and Eliza put a plate in front of her. Bread, butter, cheese, and a boiled egg. "Thank you." "Jonah said you were going to help with the water channels," Eliza said, sitting down with her own tea. "God knows we need it." "The lower orchard has been struggling for 3 years, he told me. I think I can help." Eliza studied her for a moment and Ryla had the feeling she was being measured. Then the woman nodded. "Good. My brother is a good man, but he has been trying to hold this place together by himself since our father died, and it has been hard. If you can take some of that weight, it will be worth every ounce of silver we are paying your clan for the water rights." "It is not just about the silver," Ryla said quietly. "My family needs the press access. We grow apples in the high meadows, but we have no way to process them. This compact helps both sides." "I know. I just wanted to make sure you knew we are glad to have you here." "Jonah might be too polite to say it outright, but I am not." Eliza smiled. "Welcome to the family, Ryla. I hope you are ready to work, because the orchard does not rest." Ryla found Jonah in the lower field, standing in a channel that should have been running with water but was barely damp. He looked up when she approached and his face brightened. "Good morning. Did you sleep all right?" "Better than I expected." She knelt by the channel, running her hand along the dirt. "This is your problem. The soil is too loose. The water runs through before the roots can drink." Jonah crouched beside her. "How do you fix it? Clay lining or stone? But stone is better for the long term. You set flat rocks along the bottom and sides and you angle them so the water moves slow." She looked up the slope, calculating. "How much stone do you have?" "There is a quarry at the edge of the property. We use it for building." "Then we start there. You and I can haul the stone and I will show you how to set it." They worked through the morning, hauling flat stones in a handcart and lining the first section of channel. It was hard work and Ryla's back was aching by midday, but Jonah worked beside her without complaint. He was stronger than he looked, and he had a good eye for how the stones should fit. When they stopped for lunch, Eliza brought them bread and cold meat, and Pip tagged along. "Are you making the water work?" the boy asked, peering into the channel. "We are trying," Jonah said, ruffling his hair. "It will take a few days. Can I help? You can hand us stones, but you have to stay out of the channel or your mother will skin me." Pip handed stones with great seriousness, and Ryla found herself smiling at the boy's concentration. By the time the sun was setting, they had finished the first 100 feet of channel, and Jonah stood back to survey it. "It looks good," he said. "Better than anything we have tried before. It will work better once the water runs through it for a few days. The stones will settle." Ryla wiped her hands on her trousers. "Tomorrow we do the next section." They walked back to the house together, tired and dusty, and Eliza had supper waiting. The meal was simple but good: stew, bread, and early greens from the garden. Jonah's brother-in-law, Marcus Trent, joined them, a thin man with sharp eyes and a way of watching Ryla that made her uneasy. "So you are the orc bride," he said, and his tone was not quite friendly. "I am Ryla Jorvath," she said evenly, "Jonah's wife, and you are redoing the irrigation." "We are improving it," Jonah said. "Ryla knows high meadow water management. It is part of why the compact made sense." Marcus grunted. "Let us hope it works. The orchard cannot take another failed season." There was a tightness in his voice, and Ryla realized that he was worried, not just about the orchard, but about his own livelihood. She knew that Marcus managed the accounts, which meant he saw the numbers that Jonah probably tried not to think about. "It will work," she said quietly. "I have done this before." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I hope you are right." After supper, Ryla and Jonah went back to their room. The evening routine was awkward, both of them trying to navigate the small space. But Jonah turned his back while she changed into her night clothes, and she did the same for him. When they climbed into bed, he pulled her close again, and this time she did not shake. "Thank you for today," he said into the darkness. "The channel looks better than I thought it would. It is just stone and water, not magic, maybe, but it felt like progress." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you all right? I know Marcus can be prickly." "He is worried about money." "He is always worried about money. It is his job." Jonah sighed. "But he is right that we need a good season. Last year was bad and the year before was worse. If we don't turn things around, we might lose the orchard." Ryla turned to face him in the dark. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that I agreed to a marriage compact with a clan we barely knew because we needed the water rights and the press fees." He said it without bitterness, just as a fact. "I am not sorry I did, but I would be lying if I said there was no pressure." "Then we make it work," Ryla said. "Both of us. That is what the compact is for." Jonah's hand found hers under the blanket and squeezed. "Both of us," he agreed. They spent the next 2 weeks working on the irrigation channels, and slowly the system began to take shape. Ryla taught Jonah how to read the water flow, how to adjust the check dams for different weather, how to recognize when a channel was about to overflow. He was a quick study, and his questions were good ones. By the end of the second week, water was running clean and steady through the lower orchard, and the young trees were already greening up. "It is working," Jonah said, standing in the middle of the field with a grin on his face. "Ryla, it is actually working." She felt a flare of pride. "I told you it would. You did. I should have listened faster." He grabbed her hand and spun her around, laughing, and she found herself laughing too. When he set her down, they were both breathless and his eyes were bright. "Thank you," he said, and he leaned down and kissed her cheek. It was quick, almost absent, but Ryla felt the warmth of it long after he pulled away. The orchard settled into a rhythm after that. Jonah taught her the pruning schedule, the grafting techniques, the way to walk the rows and check for pests. Ryla taught him the high meadow methods, the songs her clan used to mark the seasons, the way to tell if a spring was going to hold through summer. They worked side by side most days, and in the evenings they sat at the table with Eliza and Pip, talking through the next day's tasks. At night, they climbed into bed together, and Jonah held her while they talked. Sometimes they fell asleep mid-conversation. Sometimes they lay awake and traded stories. He told her about learning to climb trees as a child, about the year he fell out of the big oak and broke his arm, about his mother, who had died when he was 15 and left him her recipe book. Ryla told him about the winter her clan had been snowed in for 3 months, about learning to track deer with her brother, about the time she had argued with the clan elders over a grazing boundary and won. "You like winning arguments," Jonah observed one night, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I like being right. Winning is just a side benefit." "Good to know. I will remember that the next time we disagree about something. We have not disagreed yet. We will. It is inevitable." He pulled her closer, and she felt his breath against her hair. "But I think we will be all right." Ryla closed her eyes, letting herself relax into his warmth. She had not expected this, the easy companionship, the way they fit together. The compact had been a political arrangement, a practical solution to 2 families' needs. But somewhere in the long days and the shared work, it had become something else. She was not sure what to call it yet, but it felt like the beginning of something real. Spring turned to early summer, and the orchard burst into bloom. The trees were covered in white and pink blossoms, and the air smelled like honey. Jonah walked the rows every morning, checking the flowers, watching for pollinators. Ryla walked with him, learning to see what he saw. "This is the most important time," he said, standing under a tree heavy with blooms. "If the bees don't come, or if we get a hard frost, we lose the whole crop. Then we hope for good weather. And we pray. My mother used to leave offerings for the orchard spirits. I don't know if it helped, but it couldn't hurt." Ryla had her own prayers, the ones her clan used for the growing season, but she did not say them aloud. Instead, she reached up and touched one of the blossoms, feeling the delicate petals. "They are beautiful. They are. And if we are lucky, they will turn into apples." He grinned. "Lots of apples, enough to fill the press house and pay off our debts and maybe even put some silver aside. That is a lot of hope for a few flowers. That is what orcharding is, hope and hard work and crossing your fingers." They were standing close together, and Ryla realized that she could feel the heat of him, the solid presence. She looked up, and he was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. He stopped, then started again. "I am glad you are here, Ryla. I know this was not what either of us planned, but I am glad it was you." Her heart kicked in her chest. "I am glad, too." He reached out slowly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, and she shivered. But this time it was not fear. It was something else, something warm and tight and almost painful. "Jonah, I know, we have time. But he did not move away, and neither did she. The moment stretched, fragile as the blossoms above them, and then Pip came running down the row, shouting about a bird's nest he had found, and the spell broke. Jonah stepped back, laughing, and scooped the boy up. "Show me this nest, then." Ryla followed, her heart still beating too fast, and tried to pretend that nothing had changed. But she knew it had. The frost came 3 weeks later, on a night when the sky was clear and the stars were sharp. Ryla woke to Jonah swearing, already out of bed and pulling on his clothes. "What is it, Frost? I can feel it. We need to get the smudge pots lit." She was dressed and outside in minutes, following him into the orchard. The air was cold, viciously cold, and she could see her breath. Jonah was running between the rows, lighting oil pots that would produce smoke and warmth, and Ryla ran to help him. They worked frantically, lighting pot after pot, until the orchard was full of smoke and the smell of burning oil. "Will it be enough?" Ryla asked, coughing. "I don't know. We can only do what we can do." His face was grim in the flickering light. "If we lose the blossoms, we lose the season." They stayed out until dawn, tending the fires, adding oil, watching the sky. When the sun finally rose, the frost melted, and Jonah walked the rows to assess the damage. Ryla walked with him, her heart sinking as they found frozen blossoms, blackened and limp. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad. Maybe a third of the crop." He rubbed his face, and she saw the exhaustion in every line of his body. "It could have been worse, but it is bad enough." Marcus appeared at mid-morning, took one look at the orchard, and went white. "Tell me we didn't lose everything." "2/3 of the blossoms survived," Jonah said. "We will have a crop, just not as big as we needed. 2/3 is not enough to cover the debts." "I know." Jonah's voice was flat. "But it is what we have." Marcus turned to Ryla, and his face was angry. "This is what happens when you change things. My wife's father had this orchard running fine before you showed up with your orc methods and your—" "Stop." Jonah stepped between them, his voice hard. The frost was not Ryla's fault. The irrigation didn't cause the weather. If anything, it saved us. The lower orchard was healthy enough to survive the freeze. The old sections are the ones that got hit worst. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but Eliza appeared, her face tight. "Marcus, go home. You are not helping." He left, and Eliza turned to Jonah. "How bad is it really?" "Bad, but we will manage. We always do." He sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Ryla touched his arm. "What can I do?" "Help me check the rest of the orchard. We need to know exactly what we are working with." They spent the rest of the day walking the rows, counting surviving blossoms, making notes. By evening, they had a full accounting, and it was grim. The frost had hit the oldest section of the orchard hardest, the trees that should have been the most productive. The younger trees, the ones Jonah had been nursing along, were mostly intact. "It doesn't make sense," Jonah said, staring at his notes. "The old trees should have been hardier. They have survived frosts before." Ryla thought of the old section, the way the bark looked, the way some of the branches had seemed brittle. "When did you last check those trees for disease?" "Last fall. They were fine. Check them again." They went out with lanterns as the light faded, and Jonah cut into the bark of one of the old trees. The wood underneath was dark, streaked with rot. "Apple canker," he said, his voice hollow. "How did I miss this? It spreads fast when the tree is stressed. The frost probably made it worse." Ryla looked at the orchard, at row after row of old trees. "How many are infected?" "I don't know. We will have to check them all." He sat down on the ground, his head in his hands. "If it is through the whole section, we are finished. We can't afford to lose the old trees." Ryla sat beside him. "Then we find a way to save them." "There is no way. Once canker sets in, the tree is dead. You cut it down and burn it so it doesn't spread." "That is the human method, but my clan has another way." She hesitated, then went on. We use coppicing. You cut the tree back to the stump, treat the stump with ash mulch, and let it regrow. It takes a year, but the new growth is clean. Jonah looked up. Does it work? It works for our trees. I don't know if it will work for yours, but it is better than burning them. The Growers Association would never allow it. They have rules about disease management. Then we don't tell the association. We do it quietly in one block and see if it works. If it does, we can show them the results. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. We try it your way, but if it spreads, it won't spread. I know what I am doing. They started the next day, cutting back the infected trees in the worst block. It was brutal work, sawing through trunks, hauling away the branches. Jonah worked with a kind of grim determination, and Ryla worked beside him, showing him how to make the cuts, how to prepare the stumps. When the cutting was done, she mixed the ash mulch, a combination of wood ash, compost, and clay, and spread it thick over each stump. Now we wait, she said, standing back to look at the field of stumps. It looked like a graveyard. How long? A month to see if the treatment takes. 3 months to see new growth. A year to know if it worked. Jonah wiped his face, leaving a streak of ash. A year. God, Ryla, I don't know if we have a year. We have time, she said, echoing his words from their wedding night. We will make it work. But time was not kind. The rumors started within a week. Marcus had seen the cut trees, had heard about the orc methods, and he talked. He talked to the other growers, to the merchants in the village, to anyone who would listen. The orc bride was experimenting on the Garrett orchard. She was using unproven methods. She was going to poison the land. Ryla heard the whispers when she went to the village for supplies. Saw the way people looked at her, the way they stepped aside when she passed. Jonah heard them too, and his face went tight and angry. Ignore them, he said. They don't know what they are talking about. Your brother-in-law is making it worse. I know. Eliza is trying to get him to stop, but he is convinced we are ruining the orchard. Jonah slammed a bucket down harder than necessary. He forgets that it is my orchard, my risk, my choice. He is worried about his family, so am I, but I am not spreading lies to feel better about it. The tension in the house grew. Marcus stopped coming to meals. Eliza was quiet and strained, caught between her brother and her husband. Pip asked why Uncle Marcus was mad, and no one had a good answer. Ryla tried to focus on the work. She checked the stumps every day, watching for signs of new growth, watching for signs of spreading infection. The healthy trees needed care too, and she and Jonah worked through the rows, pruning, thinning, doing everything they could to maximize the surviving crop. Summer came on strong, hot and dry, and the irrigation channels proved their worth. The lower orchard stayed green while other farms' trees wilted. The Growers Association sent a representative to see the Garrett setup, and Ryla made herself scarce while Jonah walked him through the system. What did he say? She asked that night. He said it was impressive. He also said he heard we were using unorthodox disease management, and he wanted to see the affected block. Jonah's jaw was tight. I told him the block was under treatment and not ready for inspection. He said if we were using unapproved methods, the association would have to get involved. They can do that. They can revoke our certification, which means we can't sell to the major buyers, which means we are finished. He looked at her, and his eyes were tired. Ryla, if this doesn't work, it will work. Give it time. Time is the one thing we don't have. But the stumps were sprouting. Tiny green shoots, fragile but healthy, pushing up through the ash mulch. Ryla checked them every morning, her heart lifting every time she saw new growth. It was working. Slowly, but it was working. She wanted to show Jonah, wanted to share the small victory, but he was distracted. The rest of the orchard was demanding all his attention, and the surviving apples were starting to swell on the branches. They were small, smaller than they should have been, and he worried over them constantly. "We need rain," he said, scanning the cloudless sky. "Or we need to increase the irrigation. The springs are already running low. If we take more water, we will drain them dry. Then we hope for rain." The rain didn't come. The summer stretched on, hot and dry, and the apples grew slowly. Jonah walked the rows at dawn and dusk, checking the fruit, checking the leaves, looking for any sign of trouble. Ryla walked with him when she could, but she spent most of her time tending the coppiced block, nurturing the fragile new growth. They were like two people orbiting each other, close but not touching, and Ryla felt the distance like a physical ache. At night, they still climbed into bed together, but Jonah fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the day's work. Ryla lay awake, listening to his breathing, and tried not to think about the way he had looked at her in the blooming orchard before the frost, before everything went wrong. Harvest came in early autumn, and the apples were smaller than normal but clean and sweet. Jonah hired the seasonal workers, and they picked from dawn to dusk, filling crate after crate. The press house hummed with activity, Eliza managing the workers with brisk efficiency. Ryla helped where she could, hauling crates, sorting fruit, learning the rhythms of the press. Marcus stayed away, but his absence was loud. Jonah did not talk about it, but Ryla saw the tightness in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when someone mentioned his brother-in-law. The Growers' Association came for their inspection in mid-harvest. 3 men in formal coats, walking the orchard with clipboards and disapproving faces. Jonah walked with them, answering questions, showing them the healthy sections. Ryla stayed in the press house, out of sight, but she watched through the window as they reached the coppiced block. One of the men said something sharp. Jonah's face went still. They argued, voices rising, and then one of the men pulled out a notebook and started writing. When they left, Jonah came into the press house, his face pale. "What did they say?" Eliza asked. "They said we violated association protocols by using unproven disease management. They said the coppicing method has no documented success rate with apple trees. They said," he stopped, then went on. "They said they are recommending we lose our certification unless we can prove the method works, and they are not allowing the method to be documented or shared, even if it does work. They called it an unscientific folk practice." Ryla felt cold. "They won't even let you record it. They said if we want to experiment on our own land, that is our business. But the association cannot endorse methods brought in by," he stopped again, and his face was furious. "By outside influences, that is what they called you, an outside influence. Because I am an orc. Yes. Because you are an orc." He slammed his hand on the table. "It doesn't matter that the method is working. It doesn't matter that the new growth is clean. They won't even look at it properly because it came from your clan." Eliza was watching Ryla. "Is it working? Truly, come see for yourself." They walked out to the coppiced block, all 3 of them, and Eliza stared at the rows of stumps with their crowns of green growth. Some of the shoots were already 2 feet tall, healthy and vigorous. "This is what they are calling unscientific," Eliza said. "This looks better than half the new plantings in the valley. It doesn't matter what it looks like. The association has made up its mind." Jonah sounded defeated. "We finish the harvest, we press the cider, and we hope it is enough to keep us afloat. And next year, if the coppiced block produces, maybe we can fight the ruling. But for now, we keep our heads down and survive." Ryla wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but she saw the exhaustion in Jonah's face and kept silent. They went back to the harvest, back to the press, and she threw herself into the work. But at night, lying beside Jonah in the dark, she made a decision. If the association would not document her method, she would document it herself. She would write down every step, every measurement, every observation. And when the block produced clean fruit, she would have the proof she needed. She started the next day, writing in the early mornings before the work began. She documented the ash mulch recipe, the cutting technique, the timeline of regrowth. She sketched the stumps, measured the shoots, recorded everything she could think of. It was slow work, and she had to hide the notes from the association inspectors who came back twice more, looking for violations. But she kept writing. The harvest ended. The press ran for 2 more weeks, and then the cider was casked and stored. Jonah tallied the numbers with Marcus, the two of them working in tense silence, and when the final accounting was done, Jonah came to find Ryla in the orchard. "We broke even," he said. "Barely. We can pay the workers and cover the debts, but there is nothing left over. If next year is the same or worse, we will lose the orchard. Next year will be better. The coppice block will produce, if it produces, if the association doesn't shut us down first. If we can find buyers willing to work with a farm that lost its certification." He sat down under one of the trees and Ryla sat beside him. "I knew this would be hard, but I didn't think it would be this hard." "We have time," Ryla said softly. "The compact is for 20 years. We only need to hold on." "Do we?" He looked at her, and his eyes were dark. "Be honest, Ryla. If you could go back knowing what you know now, would you still sign the compact?" She thought about it. The long days, the hard work, the whispers and the judgment. The way Marcus looked at her, the way the village women stepped aside when she passed. The frost and the canker and the association's refusal to even consider her methods. And then she thought about Jonah's hand in hers, the way he laughed at her terrible jokes, the way he held her at night. The way he had looked at her in the blooming orchard, the way he defended her to the association, the way he trusted her with his family's land. "Yes," she said, "I would still sign it." He was quiet for a long moment, then he reached out and took her hand. "So would I." They sat there as the sun set, hands linked, and Ryla felt something settle in her chest. This was not the easy romance of ballads, the kind where everything fell into place with a kiss and a declaration. This was harder, messier, more real, but it was theirs. Winter came and the orchard rested. Jonah used the quiet months to repair equipment, to plan for the next season. Ryla used the time to finish her documentation and to teach Jonah the high meadow songs her clan used to mark the turning year. He had a terrible singing voice, but he tried anyway, and she loved him for it. She realized it one morning in the middle of winter, watching him coax the fire to life in the kitchen stove. He was grumbling about damp wood and poor ventilation, his hair sticking up at odd angles, and she thought, "I love him." The thought was so clear, so certain, that she almost said it aloud. But she held the words back, afraid of what they might change. The new year brought snow, and then a cold snap that froze the water channels solid. Jonah and Ryla spent a week breaking ice, keeping the springs flowing, making sure the orchard would have water when the thaw came. It was brutal work, but they did it together, and at night they climbed into bed and warmed each other until the shaking stopped. Spring came late, and when it came fast. The snow melted in a rush, the channels ran high, and the orchard burst into bloom almost overnight. Jonah walked the rows with Ryla, checking the blossoms, and his face was cautiously hopeful. "It looks good," he said. "Better than last year. The trees are stronger. The irrigation helped. Your irrigation," he smiled at her. "You were right about all of it." They reached the coppiced block and Ryla's breath caught. The stumps were covered in blossoms, white and pink and fragrant. The new growth had flourished over the winter and the young branches were thick with flowers. "Jonah, look." He stared at the block, his eyes wide. "It worked." "Ryla, it actually worked." "I told you it would." He grabbed her, lifted her off her feet, and spun her around. "You brilliant, stubborn, wonderful woman. It worked. When he set her down, they were both laughing, and Ryla's heart was beating so hard she thought it might burst. Jonah's hands were on her waist, and he was looking at her with something fierce and bright in his eyes. "I have been trying not to say this," he said, his voice rough, "because I didn't want to pressure you, didn't want you to feel like you had to feel a certain way just because we are married. But Ryla, I love you," she said, and the words came out in a rush before she could stop them. "I have loved you for months, and I didn't know how to say it, didn't know if you wanted to hear it, but I do. I love you." He kissed her. It was not careful or gentle or slow. It was fierce and desperate and full of all the things they had not said to each other, all the feelings they had been holding back. Ryla kissed him back, her hands in his hair, and when they finally broke apart they were both breathing hard. "I love you too," Jonah said, his forehead against hers. "I have loved you since you sat down in the middle of the irrigation channel and told me I was doing everything wrong. I love your stubbornness and your brilliance and the way you hum when you are concentrating. I love you, Ryla. I love you." She kissed him again, softer this time, and tasted salt on his lips. She realized he was crying, and so was she, and neither of them cared. They stood there in the blooming orchard, holding each other, and Ryla felt something in her chest unlock. This was what she had been afraid of on her wedding night, this overwhelming feeling, this vulnerability. But Jonah had been right. They had time, and they had used it well. "We should go back to the house," Jonah said eventually, his voice hoarse, "before Pip comes looking for us and asks awkward questions. In a minute." Ryla pulled him closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "I just want to stay here a little longer." "We have time," he said, and she heard the smile in his voice. "All the time in the world." The coppiced block bloomed heavy, and when the petals fell, tiny apples began to swell on the branches. Jonah checked them obsessively, measuring, comparing, taking notes. Ryla added her own observations to her documentation, recording every detail. "The association is going to have to admit this works," Jonah said one evening, standing in the block with a measuring tape. "The growth is as good as the healthy trees. Better, even. The fruit is larger. Will they admit it? Or will they find another reason to dismiss it?" He was quiet. "I don't know, but we will have the proof either way." The proof came in autumn, when the coppiced block produced a full crop of clean, perfect apples. Jonah harvested them with shaking hands, filling crate after crate with fruit that was larger and sweeter than anything the old block had produced in years. "It is a miracle," Eliza said, biting into one of the apples. "This is the best fruit we have had in a decade." "It is not a miracle. It is Ryla's method." Jonah looked at his sister. "The association needs to see this. They won't care. You know they won't. Then we make them care. We bring them out here, show them the numbers, show them the fruit. And if they still refuse to document it, we go over their heads. We take it to the regional board." Eliza raised her eyebrows. "That is bold and risky. If you make an enemy of the association, they already dismissed us. What more can they do?" He looked at Ryla. "What do you think?" "I think we have the proof. I think we should use it." They requested an official inspection, and the association sent the same 3 men who had come the year before. They walked through the coppiced block with sour faces, made notes, and measured the fruit. One of them tried to claim the success was due to favorable weather. Another suggested the block had never been as sick as Jonah claimed. "Here," Ryla said, and she pulled out her documentation. A year's worth of notes, measurements, sketches. The ash mulch recipe, the cutting technique, the timeline of regrowth. Everything is here, every step. You can verify it. The lead inspector barely glanced at it. "This is not an approved methodology. The association cannot endorse folk practices, regardless of results. This is not a folk practice. This is documented, repeatable horticulture." Jonah's voice was hard. And if the association refuses to recognize effective methods because of where they come from, then the association is not serving its members. The inspector's face went red. Mr. Garrett, I suggest you remember who you are speaking to. The association has the authority to what? Revoke our certification. You already threatened that. Do it or don't, but stop pretending this is about science. Jonah took Ryla's hand. My wife saved this orchard. Her method works. And if the association is too prejudiced to see that, then the problem is with the association, not with us. The inspectors left in a huff, and a week later the official letter came. The Garrett Orchard certification was under review pending a regional board hearing. Jonah read the letter, crumpled it, and threw it in the fire. Let them review it. We have nothing to hide. The hearing was scheduled for midwinter, and Jonah spent weeks preparing. He compiled yield numbers, fruit quality assessments, soil samples. Ryla organized her documentation, adding sketches and detailed descriptions. Eliza helped where she could, and even Marcus grudgingly admitted that the copist block's success was impressive. I didn't think it would work, he said, standing in the block with his hands in his pockets. I thought you were risking everything on some orc superstition. I was wrong. It was as close to an apology as Marcus was likely to give, and Jonah accepted it with a nod. We were all worried, but Ryla knew what she was doing. Marcus looked at Ryla. I owe you an apology, too, for the things I said, the rumors I spread. It was not right. No, it was not, Ryla said evenly. But you were afraid for your family. I understand that. Still. I am sorry. Ryla nodded, and some of the tension that had hung over the family for a year finally eased. The regional board hearing was held in the market town, a 2-day journey from the orchard. Jonah and Ryla traveled together, the documentation packed carefully in oiled cloth. The hearing room was full of growers, association officials, and curious onlookers. Ryla saw the stares, heard the whispers, but Jonah squeezed her hand and she held her head high. The board heard the association's case first. The inspectors claimed that the Garrett orchard had violated protocols, that the coppicing method was unproven and potentially dangerous, that allowing such methods would undermine the association's authority. They spoke for an hour, and Ryla's heart sank with every word. Then it was Jonah's turn. He stood before the board with his notes in hand, and he spoke clearly and calmly. He explained the canker infection, the decision to try coppicing, the careful documentation of every step. He showed the yield numbers, the fruit quality assessments, the before and after sketches. And then he gestured to Ryla. This method was developed by the Jorvath clan over generations of high meadow orchard work. It has been tested and refined, and it works. My wife documented every step so that other growers could learn from it. The association is refusing to recognize it not because it is unproven, but because it came from an orc. That is prejudice, not science. One of the board members, an older woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. Mrs. Garrett, you are the one who performed the coppicing. Ryla stood. Yes. And you documented the process. I did. Every step. She pulled out the documentation and the board members passed it around, reading carefully. This is thorough work, the woman said, and the results speak for themselves. Why did the association refuse to review it? They said it was a folk practice, Ryla said, an unscientific method. They would not even look at the documentation because I am an orc. The room went silent. The board members exchanged glances. Then the woman said, the association exists to serve growers, not to enforce prejudice. If this method works, it should be shared. Mrs. Garrett, would you be willing to present your documentation to the association's research committee? Yes, Ryla said, her heart pounding. I would. The board deliberated for an hour, and when they returned, they ruled in favor of the Garrett orchard. The certification was upheld, the coppicing method was approved for documentation, and the association was ordered to include Ryla's work in its official records. Jonah grabbed Ryla and kissed her right there in the hearing room, and she kissed him back, not caring who saw. When they finally pulled apart, the room was buzzing with talk, and the sharp-eyed board member was smiling. "Well done, Mrs. Garrett, both of you." They traveled home the next day triumphant, and Eliza met them at the door with Pip bouncing beside her. "Well, we won," Jonah said, grinning. "The method is approved. Ryla is going to be in the official records." Eliza hugged them both. "I knew you could do it. I am so proud of you." That night, Ryla and Jonah lay in bed, too wired to sleep. Jonah pulled her close and she rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I can't believe it is over," she said. "It is not over. It is just beginning." He kissed the top of her head. "You are going to be famous, Ryla. Every grower in the region is going to want to learn your methods." "Our methods. We did this together." "We did." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember our wedding night? When you were shaking so hard you couldn't untie your belt, I remember. You said we had time. We did. And we used it well." He tipped her chin up so he could look at her. "I love you, Ryla Garrett. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you for the rest of my life." "I love you too," she said, and kissed him. It was slow and sweet and full of promise, and when they finally drew apart, Jonah smiled. "You want to know what I am thinking about?" "What?" "How glad I am that I didn't rush, that we took the time to know each other, to build this together." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You are worth waiting for." Ryla felt tears sting her eyes, but they were happy tears. "So are you." They made love that night finally, and it was everything she had been afraid of and everything she had hoped for. It was awkward and sweet and fumbling and perfect, and when they lay tangled together afterward, Ryla felt complete in a way she never had before. "We should have done that sooner," Jonah said, his voice drowsy and content. "No, we did it exactly when we were ready." She kissed his shoulder. "We had time." "We still do," he said, and pulled her closer. The seasons turned. The orchard flourished, the coppiced block became a model for other growers, and Ryla found herself teaching her methods to anyone who asked. Jonah worked beside her, managing the orchard, experimenting with new grafts, always looking for ways to improve. They were partners in every sense, and the compact that had started as a political arrangement became a marriage in truth. The years passed, and the orchard grew. Eliza remarried, a kind man who worked the harvest and made her laugh. Pip grew into a lanky teenager who loved the orchard as much as Jonah did. Marcus mellowed, and even admitted that the compact had been the best thing that ever happened to the family. Ryla's clan came to visit, and her father walked the orchard with pride in his eyes. "You did well, daughter, better than I hoped." "We did well," Ryla corrected. "Jonah and I, together." Her mother embraced Jonah like a son, and her brother joked that he was jealous of how well the compact had turned out. "My betrothed and I are still figuring out how to talk to each other without blushing." "Give it time," Jonah said, grinning. "Time and patience." The compact was renewed after 20 years, not because it had to be, but because both families wanted it. By then, Ryla and Jonah's orchard was one of the most productive in the region, and their methods were taught in agricultural schools. They had become a symbol of what cooperation could achieve, human and orc working together. But for Ryla, the real victory was smaller. It was in the way Jonah reached for her hand in the morning, the way he smiled when she came in from the orchard, the way they fit together after years of learning each other's rhythms. It was in the home they had built, the life they had made, the love that had grown slowly and surely between them. The cider pressing festival came around again, a year and a day after the regional board hearing, and the valley gathered to celebrate the harvest. The press house was full of barrels, the air thick with the smell of apples and fermentation. Jonah was in the middle of it all, tasting samples, greeting neighbors, making sure everything ran smoothly. Ryla watched him from the doorway, her heart full. He looked up, caught her eye, and smiled. It was the smile he saved just for her, the one that made her feel like the only person in the world. She crossed the crowded room and took his hand. "Come with me. Now. We are in the middle of now." She tugged him toward the door, and he followed, laughing. They walked out into the orchard, into the rows of trees heavy with nearly finished apples. The noise of the festival faded behind them, and the evening air was cool and sweet. Ryla led him to the coppiced block, to the place where everything had turned around and stopped. "What is this about?" Jonah asked, but he was smiling. Ryla turned to face him, taking both his hands. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding night?" "I said a lot of things. You said we had time, and you were right. We had time to know each other, to learn each other, to build something real." She stepped closer, and his arms went around her. "I just wanted to say thank you for giving me that time, for being patient, for loving me even when I was too scared to love you back." Jonah's eyes were bright. "Ryla, I am not finished. I also wanted to say that I would do it all again. Every hard day, every fight, every moment of doubt, because it brought us here. And here is exactly where I want to be." He kissed her, and it was like the first time and the 100th time all at once. When they pulled apart, he was grinning. "You know what I want?" "What?" "More time. Years and years of it, with you in this orchard building our life." He looked around at the trees, at the land they had saved together. "What do you say? Do we have a deal?" Ryla laughed. "We have a deal." They stood there as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, and the orchard whispered around them. The compact had given them 20 years, but they had given each other a lifetime. And as the stars came out overhead, Ryla thought about the girl she had been on her wedding night, trembling and afraid, and the woman she had become. It had taken time, but she had learned that love was not something to fear. It was something to build day by day, season by season, with patience and care and trust. Jonah took her hand, and they walked back to the festival together. The press house was still full of noise and laughter, but now it felt like home. Eliza waved them over, and Pip demanded to know where they had disappeared to, and Marcus poured them each a glass of the new cider. "To the orchard," Jonah said, raising his glass. "And to my brilliant wife who saved it." "To partnership," Ryla countered. "And to taking the time to do things right." They drank, and the cider was perfect, sweet and tart and full of the promise of good years ahead. Around them, the valley celebrated, human and orc together, the old prejudices fading in the face of shared success. It was not perfect, and there was still work to do, but it was progress. Real, solid progress. Later, much later, when the festival had wound down and the guests had gone home, Ryla and Jonah walked back to their house under a sky full of stars. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom, the one they had shared since that first trembling night, and got ready for bed with the easy rhythm of long practice. When they climbed under the covers, Jonah pulled her close, and Ryla settled against him with a sigh of contentment. "Happy?" he asked. "Very." She kissed his jaw. "You more than I ever thought possible." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have been thinking. About the future, about what comes next." He hesitated, then went on. "How would you feel about children, not right away, but someday, when we are ready?" Ryla's heart jumped. She had thought about it too, late at night when Jonah was asleep, but she had been afraid to bring it up. Afraid of what it would mean, afraid of the complications, afraid of what the valley would say about half-orc children. But then she thought about Jonah, about the way he loved without reservation, about the home they had built. And she thought about a child with his laugh and her stubbornness, learning to climb the orchard trees and taste the first apples of the season. "I would like that," she said softly. "Someday, when we are ready." "When we are ready," he agreed. "We have time." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Ryla dreamed of apple blossoms and tiny hands and a future full of love and laughter. The seasons turned again, and 3 years after the cider pressing festival, Ryla gave birth to a daughter. They named her Nessa, and she had her father's dark hair and her mother's pointed ears, and a squall that could wake the entire valley. Jonah cried when he held her for the first time, and Ryla cried watching him, and they were both a mess of joy and terror. "We have no idea what we are doing," Jonah said, rocking the baby gently. "We will figure it out," Ryla said. "We always do," and they did. Nessa grew into a bright, curious child who loved the orchard and asked 1,000 questions a day. 2 years later, a second daughter arrived, Della, quieter than her sister, but just as determined. The house filled with noise and laughter and chaos, and Ryla and Jonah navigated parenthood the same way they had navigated everything else. Together, with patience and humor and love, the orchard thrived. The coppicing method was adopted across the region, and Ryla's documentation became required reading for new growers. She and Jonah expanded the operation, adding new varieties, experimenting with cider blends, building a reputation that extended far beyond the valley. But the heart of it was still the same: the land, the trees, the shared work, and the partnership they had built on their 10th wedding anniversary. Jonah took Ryla back to the spot where she had first told him she loved him. The coppiced block was tall and strong now, the trees mature and heavy with fruit. He pulled out a small box and handed it to her. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside was a ring, a simple band of gold with a tiny apple blossom engraved on it. Ryla looked up, her eyes stinging with tears. "I know we are already married," Jonah said, "but I wanted to give you something that was just for us. Not for the compact, not for the families. Just because I love you, and I want you to know it every time you look at your hand." Ryla slipped the ring on, and it fit perfectly. "I love you," she said, her voice thick. "I love you so much. I love you too." He kissed her, and it was sweet and familiar and still made her heart race. "Here is to the next 10 years, and the 10 after that, and all the years we have left." "All the time in the world," Ryla said, and kissed him again. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and their daughters came running to meet them, full of stories about the frog they had found in the garden and the pie Aunt Eliza was making. Jonah scooped them both up, one on each hip, and Ryla followed, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. This was what they had built. This was what time and patience and love could create. Not a perfect life, but a real one, a good one, a life worth living. And as they walked into the house together, the orchard stretching out behind them, Ryla thought about that trembling girl on her wedding night and wanted to tell her that everything was going to be all right. That the man who held her and said they had time meant it. That love was not something to fear, but something to grow slowly and carefully, like the trees in the orchard. They had taken the time, and it had been worth every moment. The years continued to unfold in a rhythm of seasons and harvests, of children growing and the orchard maturing. The compact between the Garrett and Jorvath families became a model for other cross-clan agreements in the region, proof that cooperation could benefit everyone. But for Ryla and Jonah, the compact had become something far more valuable than a political arrangement. It had become the foundation of a family, a legacy of love and hard work that they would pass on to their daughters. On a warm evening 20 years after that trembling wedding night, Ryla and Jonah stood in the orchard watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Nessa and Della were young women now, both working the orchard alongside their parents, both as stubborn and capable as Ryla had been at their age. The house was full of their laughter, their arguments, their dreams. "You remember our wedding night?" Ryla asked, leaning against Jonah's shoulder. "How could I forget? You were shaking so hard I thought you might vibrate right through the floor," he smiled, his arm around her waist. "I was terrified I was going to say the wrong thing and make it worse. You said exactly the right thing. We have time. You gave me the one thing I needed most. We both needed it, time to figure out who we were together." He turned to face her, and even after 20 years the look in his eyes still made her breath catch. "I would not change a single moment, Ryla, not one. Neither would I." She kissed him, and it was a kiss that carried 2 decades of partnership, of shared joys and weathered storms, of a love that had been built slowly and carefully and well. "Here is to the next 20 years. And all the years after that," Jonah said, "for as long as we have." They walked back to the house together, past the coppiced block that had saved the orchard, past the irrigation channels that still ran clear and strong, past the rows of trees that bore witness to everything they had built. The compact had given them 20 years, but they had given each other a lifetime of love. And as they stepped inside, into the warmth and noise and chaos of their family, Ryla knew that this was exactly where she was meant to be. They had taken the time. They had built something beautiful. And it was more than enough.